guys, and welcome back to Gryphon Studio. My name is Alan. I hope you're all doing well. So this week I've been creating some interesting bits for dungeons, a bit of dungeon scatter, namely stairs, staircases, things to ascend and descend levels. Really useful bits of terrain, add a good bit of height and depth to what you're playing on, and yeah, really quite useful. So I'm going to film or edit these at least separately so that each piece is its own separate bit, and I will show the finished products for everything right at the end of the video. So yeah, that's enough chit chat, let's get going. Alright, let's start things off with a piece of XPS foam, 4 inches by 4 inches, and I've put my usual dungeon tile 1 inch grid pattern on the back, but I've left a 3 inch by 2 inch area so that I can stack up layers of steps. Now these are all going to be 2 inches wide, but they're going to be 3 inches long, 2.5 inches long, 2 inches long, 1.5 inches long, and 1 inch long, thus giving you a nice little step effect. And these steps will all be 1/2 inch wide. But before I glue them together, I'm going to add some texture along the front edge of the step. You don't need to do the rest of the step because it's not going to be visible apart from the top one. So you can just kind of etch in a few little bricks and things and cracks in the stonework, and then bevel it a little bit deeper and add some texture with the aluminium ball. And then once you've done all that, you can start gluing them together with some hot glue. And the top one is the only one that's entirely visible, and I'm just going to use a simple dungeon tile design for the top step. Now for these side pieces, they are 2.5 inches deep and 3 inches long. These are going to follow the line of the staircase, the angle of the steps, if you like. Remember, always use several passes with a knife, a sharp knife, to get a nice clean cut. Like so. Beautiful. And you can see there how the line follows the staircase to the ground. But before they get stuck down, we need to add a little bit of texture, some stonework, some brickwork. So I've got a few of these little bits of styrene rods and various plastic parts here, and I tend to keep these just so that I can stamp in some interesting textures into XPS foam. Assuming I'm only doing small areas, small pieces of scatter terrain, this is always a really quick and easy way of doing it. So just stamp them in and change the orientation a little bit and be a little bit random with it. And continue with other pieces. And you get something that looks a little bit like this. Occasionally you'll get some sort of strangely shaped brick, maybe it's a bit of an S shape or an L shape, but you can just fix that with a beveling tool and then texture it with the aluminium ball. And you have something that looks like that. You've got to do both sides of that. And here I've got a piece of XPS foam, again very very thin piece though, and I'm just going to texture the top of it with the aluminium ball. You've got to be fairly gentle with this because foam this thin will just tear really easily, and I'm just going to layer it on the top like it's a kind of an end tile or a kind of a capping tile that goes across the top of the staircase. I'm going to run this wild all the way down to the bottom, hot glue to stick it down, and then trim off the excess. And then you can just put in a few lines if you want and deepen them with a beveling tool, bring out that texture, and you've got a nice staircase banister. And it's just a case of hot gluing it and sticking it onto the side. And obviously the same on the other side, but kind of a mirror image. Now, I love using craft beads or jewellery beads for various things. These are actually two beads stuck together, and I thought they made a really good kind of goblet style brazier, bit of a grail sort of thing. Oh, these bloody wisps are everywhere. And I stuck them down. Jesus, I stuck them down to a piece of XPS foam, and those will just act as like a little pedestal for these braziers. And then I undercoated the whole thing in Mod Podge and black paint. Now, nothing is more boring than grey brickwork, so I tend to add a few extra little bricks in the equation, and using some various warm colours, ivories, tans, browns, things like that. And I tend to just pick a random brick, paint it out, and then we can deal with it later. And you can see there that some of them are brown and a lot more warmer colours, and with that we're going to overbrush the entire thing with a medium grey. This will help dull down all those colours that you've put into the brickwork, but it will also help tie in all that brick together, make it look a little bit more cohesive. Alright, now it's time for the wash. This is my usual black-brown wash, mixed by Vallejo, and it's a little bit of water involved as well, just to help it flow a little bit and help it go a little bit further. Try and get this in all the cracks and crevices and really pick out all that detail. And there's a few side squares on next to this staircase, so I like to fill them in with various bits of terrain, candles and bookshelves, barrels, plant pots and things like that, just to make it a little bit, nicer. Alright, moving on to the descending staircase. So I'm going to use the same size piece of XPS foam here. This is a 4x4, and it's a little bit thinner than 1 centimeter. It's probably about 4 millimeters thick. And I'm just going to trim out the central 2x2 square. This is going to be our staircase down. And in a moment I'm going to glue this down to a base piece. This is going to be another piece of XPS foam, but you could use something different like some medium weight chipboard or something like that, something that's rigid, that's going to hold its shape. But first I'm going to etch in a few lines with the X-Acto knife to pick out that classic 1-inch grid square, and texture as usual. And then once glued down to the base, you can start adding a few steps in. So the idea here is to add some very, very thin layers of foam. We are working with a very shallow depth with this piece, and it's very difficult to gain extra depth on a piece that's only limited to 1 centimeter. So some very thin pieces of foam will give the illusion of steps going down, and the idea is that you just decrease in thickness as you get to the bottom, and then you leave the bottom step blank, basically no step or texture involved. So you get something that looks like that. But I want a wall as well surrounding this piece to give a little bit of extra height to the upstairs floor, I guess. This is just going to give the illusion that maybe the stairs go a little bit further down by raising the top floor higher. So I'm going to use my usual method of texturing the stonework there. I'm going to hot glue them down. And there you go. By adding those walls, I think it adds a little bit of extra depth to the piece that's otherwise going to be very, very shallow, and it stops people from just falling down a stairwell. And we have the top layer to go on here. This is just the same piece as I had earlier on the previous staircase, and then cover the whole thing in some black paint and matte Mod Podge. And it got the exact same kind of paint job and undercoat and wash and everything as the previous piece. After all, I want these pieces to match. Now that area where I didn't put a step at the bottom of the stairwell, that's just going to get a black paint job. Probably a few coats just to really kind of matte it out a little bit and hopefully give that illusion of just darkness in the bottom of this stairwell. And then I'm going to give the second step, or rather it's the first step, a kind of black wash. This is just going to really darken it down and hopefully give it the illusion that it's in a bit of shadow and getting darker as you descend. Alright, now moving on to a little bit more of a compact design. This is just a 2x2 and we're going to do a spiral staircase on this one. So the idea here is just to map out a usual dungeon tile, but only 2x2 wide. And I'm going to continue this down the edge of the tile as well, just in case I want to sit this on top of an existing dungeon tile. I don't just want a blank edge on it. And then texture it as normal. Okay, so the staircase is going to have to be stacked up against something. So I'm going to create a little stack out of these pieces of XPS foam. These are just 1-inch squares, and these are going to entirely take up one of the 1-inch squares on that base. So basically make this as high as you want it to be and figure out where it needs to go. Second, I'm going to add some steps. Now to do this I want to create some semicircle staircase pieces, and I'm going to cut out a circle, cut it in half, and then draw around that onto some pieces of XPS foam. And then cut those out, and I actually trimmed them in half a little bit to make them a little bit thinner because I didn't want these stairs to be too sort of high, and I just hot glued them down, gently curving the angle as I went up each step. As long as the straight line of the semicircle intersects the center point, then you should be okay and it should be fairly evenly distributed. So just try and make the steps about the same size as you build them, and eventually you'll end up with this kind of spiraling staircase that sort of defies gravity a little bit. Then I actually used my Proxon, but you could use a knife just to slice off that kind of gravity defying section, and that leaves you an area now where you can prop those steps up against the stacked 1-inch squares. You can add some texture on these 1-inch squares. I'm going to do a little bit of a brick texture, and bevel it out and texture it with the aluminium ball. And then you can go ahead and stick that into place. Add a bit of a brick texture on the side of the staircase, on these kind of round sections. And when that's done, you can add a bit of texture again with the aluminium ball. And then, as usual, a bit of black paint and Mod Podge over the whole thing. Now I like to add a little bit of extra detail to some pieces just to give it a little bit of character. So I've got this piece of chain here, this kind of craft jewellery chain, and I'm going to pin this into the wall with a little bit of card attached to it as well. I'm going to super glue that down, and that's going to be this kind of broken chain, maybe something that went across the stairs to stop people from going up. And yep, you guessed it, it got the exact same paint job as everything else. Same undercoat, same brickwork, same overbrush, and same wash. Now I'm going to consider this bit kind of a bonus project. This was a very quick, spur of the moment idea that I had, and it's just a simple piece of XPS foam wall attached to a 3x2 inch section of dungeon tile, and it got the usual paint job and the usual wash. The idea here was just to create a really simple idea for a staircase that was maybe a little bit lower budget and actually smaller as well. As you can see there, I added a little torch for some extra detail, and then used some coffee stirrers and pushed them into the wall and glued them in with some no nails glue. This just helped them stay nice and sturdy and nice and solid in the wall. Any excess glue was carefully wiped away with either a cotton bud or Q-tip, if that's what you call them, or a cocktail stick, just to really get in the cracks and crevices of the stonework. I then gave the steps a paint job with brown and then a dry brush here with grey, just to pick out a little bit of that wood grain detail. And then the black brown wash, the multi-purpose black brown wash that I use, that goes on everything. Honestly, this wash is borderline magic. It just goes over wood and brick and I mean even people's clothing, and it looks good on everything. It's just weird. So yeah, I use this for pretty much everything. And you get something that looks a little bit like that. Not fancy, but then not all dungeons can afford a fancy staircase. Now for some moss, I'm going to use these two products here. I'm going to mix them together on top of a plastic cup with some PVA glue. And you're just going to mash it all together. And then you should get a consistency something like that. And then just take a little sculpting tool and kind of smush that moss into some of the brickwork and on the ground and into the steps, pretty much anywhere you want. And now let's take a look at the finished product. There we go guys, all finished, all done. I'm really happy with these. I really like this piece in particular, this kind of fancier looking staircase. Just the pieces around the outside I think just make it a little bit more immersive and stuff. The barrel and the bookshelf and things, those are from Angry Stag Wargaming. It's a small company in the northeast of England, and they make some really cool sculpts for kind of dungeon scatter and town scatter and things like that. So definitely worth checking out, and very affordable as well. Yeah, I'm really happy with all these pieces. There's a few different designs for different spaces in dungeons. I mean, this one's quite big, you know, this is a 4x4 square and it takes up quite a lot of room, whereas this 2x2 is far more easy to fit in these smaller spaces. And even just simple, you know, details like moss and chains and skulls or bones or something is really good sort of additional detail just to add to these small pieces and give them a bit more character. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with those. I have an Instagram set up. If you'd like to check out Instagram, follow me on there, feel free to do so. I am also on Facebook, although I don't use that one too much. I do also have a Patreon set up. That is the best way to support the channel financially, surprisingly. And yeah, I'm really grateful for all of my existing patrons there who offer me their support every single month. If you liked this video, please feel free to leave a comment below, or hit the like button and press the notification bell, and definitely subscribe if you haven't already. I think something like half of my viewers aren't subscribed, so feel free to hit that button, and hopefully I can get back to you real soon with another video. That's it for this one though. I'll see you again next time. Thanks for stopping by, and happy crafting.